validated I feel about the upcoming event, about why we collect things, because that makes me feel so much better about my maximalist setup here tonight. In addition to archaeology, fossils, and the Pleistocene, I also have a deep forever love in the LEP Club and the HERP Club. So there are LEPs and HERPs and everything else, everything in between in this room with us tonight. So I hope everybody here is an animal lover, because we can't escape it. I know a lot of the webinars I have attended start with a presentation and end with questions. And I would really rather do it the other way around. I would love to hear questions from the participants or viewers first, and then go through what I have prepared after and make sure I hit all those questions from the get-go, if that's okay.
That's perfect. You can just raise your hand, and you can, and then I can call on you if you want to ask Brittany a question about the mural or about anything, I guess. Okay, Shira or Shira, go ahead.
We were wondering, like, whether you planned it ahead of time and did like a mini sketch before doing it on like a huge wall.
I think a couple, it looks like some people are in the chat have similar or joined questions. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is I did tons of planning and tons of sketches and lots of practice. And I think if the goal was to depict one giant mammoth from the ground's point of view looking up, I probably would have had to use the method of, you might have seen it before in other areas where there's a grid on the wall and the different parts of the animal go in the grid and you match it up to make sure everything's in proportion. If that was if the goal of the mural was to have like one big mammoth on it, I probably would have used that style of planning. But the goal was to depict the woolly mammoth in Maryland's landscape from that time, which meant that the animals had to be much smaller in the picture, which was very, in my opinion, rebellious, because anytime I've researched woolly mammoth art or Googled woolly mammoth art, it's always from the ground looking up at this enormous animal, which is understandable. Like, they are huge and majestic, and like as artists, it's reasonable that we would want to convey feeling dwarfed by it. But this particular assignment didn't have that goal. The goal was to see them in their landscape. And part of the research that I did included the plant life that had to sustain those animals. I could not, off the top of my head, name every resource that we looked through, except Bronwyn thankfully does have all of the old Zoom links from the Mammoth series, which I watched. And one of the big takeaways was how much plant life there had to be to sustain herds of these animals. And the plant life had to be huge. It had to be abundant. And when I researched the different species, I learned that the pine and cypress and spruce can grow from 60 to 200 feet. And even though the mammoths are huge, the trees are even bigger. So they ended up looking fairly small in the shot that we picked. And that allowed me to be a little freer and have more flexibility with planning the composition. And I did not have to do a grid. And I'm not the most confident landscape painter. I was confident enough to say yes to the project, but it's not my area of expertise. I think animals are my area of expertise. So I did so much. I did come prepared with some of my sketches. I did so much practice just of the landscape itself. And no amount of practice was ever going to match the size of the final product. So it was really important for me to be mindful during the sketching process and map out where things would go. And if something works, why not? If something does work, why? For example, I realized I really wanted to balance out a tree in the middle ground with smaller trees in the background. So that shows up in a lot of the sketches that I did and then stuck true to the mural. But I had a lot of freedom in the sense that it didn't ruin the painting if the tree was 1 or 2 inches in further or out further than one might have imagined, because that wasn't the point of the mural. So just having an overall sense of balance in the composition was good enough. And that's why I got to do all these smaller sketches and not have to do a grid. I know that was a long answer to a simple question, but I hope that
Oh no, that was exactly what we were asking. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hooey. Thank you. I'm so excited to do this, and I have so many thoughts running through my mind that I might ramble a bit, and feel free to.
We like hearing you ramble.
Yeah. Thank you.
We saw the mural in person and we were rambling too about it.
Yeah, it was really impressive. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. It really does. I'm so excited.
So Sarah asked, how do you approach something so huge and daunting? So, you know, it's not just a one little picture, it's on a wall and it's going to be seen by so many different people. And so how did you approach that?
I think part of that answer was already addressed, that I had to do a lot of sketches and planning. But another aspect to that answer would be the nothing takes the place of practice. So sketching for me isn't just about planning, it's about muscle memory. And it's like the chance to make mistakes in a low stakes situation. So, oh, okay, great. And for example, I did a lot of sketches that I'm not really proud of. Like, these look like they're really messy. There's not a lot of control. It's not something I would ever put into merch or like on my business card, but they were really important for me to get the hang of the anatomy and decide what value scale I wanted, value being how light or dark something is. And here's other good, I like this progression a lot. So here, we have in order 3 different sketches I did of mammoths. And they start out really blocky and basic and then get a little more sophisticated. And then finally, I have this one in plastic because I love it so much. I like can't live without it. I'm in love with this sketch. And this ended up being the sketch I modeled or interpreted onto the wall itself. And I couldn't have gotten here without these clunky, ugly, well, I guess ugly is opinionated, but these are not sketches or representations I would put on the wall. These were meant for me to learn from. And I did that with the mammoths. I did it with the trees. I did it with the grass and the bushes. And I don't think I could have tackled this mural without practice. And that practice needed to have a schedule because the mural was so big. It took 87 hours over 8 weeks. I blocked off from the moment I said, yes, I can do it. I blocked off every weekend in my calendar, and I went for anywhere between 4 to 8 hours, Saturday and Sunday, every weekend. And I reverse engineered it, I think. So I didn't know it would take me 87 hours exactly, but I did know I had 8 weeks, and that left me just enough margin for error and to have it done in time, but like well before the members opening. So I reverse engineered how not in hours per se, but in days and weeks and in stages. Like I knew I would paint the skyline before the foreground. I think this will be easier to explain with one of the sketches. I knew I was going to work from the furthest point away to the closest to the viewer. So I practiced my clouds and glacier and horizon line first. And once I got confident with that, then I practiced my trees. And once I got confident with those, then I practiced my mammoths. So I did schedule my weeknights after work. I work at Irvine Nature Center as a shameless plug. It's lovely. And so every evening during the week, I planned out my sketches of what I was going to practice. And every weekend, I had it on the schedule. Like, I need to get the skyline done today. I need to get these done today. I need to get this grass done that day. And there was enough flexibility. Like I may have mentioned, some things took 4-hour sittings, some things took 8-hour sittings. That part I didn't really know, like down to the minute, how long something would take. I just gave myself enough time to accomplish each stage. So I think that may have answered the second question, how I approached it.
And I think that answers Richard's question about how long did it take.
Mm-hmm.
And then Robin asked, how much artistic license did you take concerning colors and texture?
A bit. I think I took more license with the plant life than the mammoth itself. The textures of the fur and the form, I think, is nothing groundbreaking that I represented. It's like a shaggy brown hair, and that's based not on the myriad of other mammoth pieces out there, but also some of the artifacts that we've seen, like in Smithsonian magazine. So I don't think that there's a lot of artistic license there. But the plant life, I did feel like I was doing scientifically my best guess. An example would be the buffalo berry bush, because in some of the seminars and articles, the seminars from Natural History Society and some articles I read from the Smithsonian, it seems like the mammoths would have eaten not just grasses, but shrubbery. And so I needed to depict a plant that had woody stems and leaves and berries. And I picked the buffalo berry bush as my reference, but I don't think it's like textbook depicted in the artwork. It's just there to represent plants like that could have been in Maryland at that time.
And I have a question, had you done a large scale mural before, or was this the largest artwork that you've ever done?
When I was 11, I did a mural of dolphins in my mom's garage. And I think this is the biggest piece I've done since then. In I haven't changed much. I still don't ask before I do something. It was a summer vacation. My mom was at work. You know, I was home alone all day, and I was just inspired. I think I had recently been to the National Aquarium, and I did the coral reef and dolphins and a sun. And my mom came home and she just had a mural in her garage, and her only if you can call it negativity, was like she didn't like where I put the sun. Like I put it off to the side coming out of like the corner, and she was like, I would have wanted it in the middle. And I was like, Mom, that's so boring. You can't put a focal point in the middle of a composition. And I'm just, I can't, it might go without saying, but I can't not say it. I'm really lucky that like I had that type of environment where I didn't need to ask to paint a mural in the garage. I just did it. And it's like that now too, like in my home that I share with my husband. If he's out for the day, he doesn't know if he's going to come home to a mural on the wall. I've done some bedrooms around the house where I'm a big Disney fan. So one summer I did the Tangled mural that Rapunzel has in her tower around our guest room. One time I painted an ombre thing where like it starts black on top and then fades to green towards the bottom. And I think I've just always been like that. But in comparison, this was my most daunting project. It had a lot of aspects that I've never had to tackle before. And I really do feel like if I hadn't been not just painting on walls before, but I have sketchbooks on sketchbooks on sketchbooks of animals. And I also have been every couple months, I have like a new self-imposed discipline, like painting in under 40 minutes, or painting without using black, or painting without the paper drying first. Like I give myself these challenges or parameters just for the sake of personal growth. And it really did feel like all of those things culminated into painting this mural, which is one of the things that made it so fulfilling. I think Robin.
So, yeah, so Robin asked, since you fulfilled your mural dream, what's the next one?
In the short term, it's merchandise. I'm really in love with some of the sketches that we came up with. Like this dude here, I love him or her so much. And the Marissa from the museum agreed to buy some note cards in wholesale for the gift shop. So I think step one of fulfilling my dream is taking this content further. I've done pet portraits. I've done scientific illustration. I've spanned a couple of really fulfilling genres, but it would be really, really cool to keep the content from the mural going in different forms. So I think if the cards sell nicely in the gift shop at the museum, I would probably open an Etsy and use whatever revenue I get to put towards more products. Like the kids at school really like stickers. They all like to put stickers on their computers and water bottles and things like that. I'm like, oh, I would love my favorite mammoth to be a sticker on a child's water bottle. That would be great.
I have another question, going backwards a little bit. Since it was so big and you had to stand on ladders and all of that kind of stuff, was that challenging, or did you have to get your, channel your inner Michelangelo and all that kind of stuff to work on so high up in the air? Did that
that was a big deal that I was blessed to not have to worry about too much. Because the structure supporting the fossils was being built at the same time, there was already a lot of equipment like scaffolding and ladders and trays and extension cords and lighting for me to utilize while I was working. It would have been a lot harder to provide those materials myself. So that, I don't know if it was planned or serendipity, but I took it and it worked out perfectly. So I did use scaffolding and ladders for like the top half of the mural. And then for the bottom half, a friend of mine, Rebecca Sparks, is a talented, experienced muralist, and she lent me her favorite mural bench. And I can see why she likes it so much, because it was really nice to work on. It gave me just a leg up enough that I didn't have to paint on my tippy toes in that mid-range. And I also couldn't have done it without my handy dandy hair dryer. While I was working on the background or the midground, the wall was about 12 feet wide, so I could work from left to right and have the left side dry by the time I got back to it with the details. But once I started painting the foreground and the mammoths themselves, I needed that paint to dry fast before I could go in with another layer of paint. So I could not have done that in a timely manner without my hair dryer. And that ties back into practice, practice, practice. I wouldn't have known to do that if I hadn't pushed myself in previous projects to work so quickly, or to work with only using one brush or only using this type of paint. Like those exercises I gave myself filled me with like tips and tricks and problem solving as I meandered through this beautiful mural.
And what thing did you learn? What was that you learned through this process, personally as well as, I guess, professionally or skill wise, craft wise?
From an artist perspective, it was really validating. Because like I said, it felt like everything I'd ever practiced set me up for success. And it feels like there's no substitute for that practice. And I also feel like planning was like it reinforced my ability to plan, because as an artist, of course, sometimes I like to be impulsive and fly by the seat of my pants, and that's part of the fun of expression. But every single thing, from planning the color palette to where I sat on the scaffolding to where I put my paintbrushes in between brush strokes, from planning the lighting, like every single thing had to be considered ahead of time in order for it to go as smoothly as it did. I'm not going to say I couldn't have done it otherwise, but I got it done on time, which scared me. And I think it's because every single thing I considered ahead of time. And I think a lot of other artists find success, especially if they're doing like speed painting or limited palette painting. Setting themselves up is half the battle, like putting your water in the perfect spot, putting your brush in the perfect spot, having the perfect tray to put your paint in. Those sort of things might not matter in like I don't remember those things mattering in my first art class in first grade, but I'm to a point now where like all those things really add up to making the process just that much smoother. I almost wonder if it's like if somebody's biking for leisure, there's a lot of leeway on what type of bike, what type of shoes, what type of helmet, what type of pants. And then once they're doing like an Ironman competition, every detail really matters because you're doing so much or in such a grand scale. So I think it's like that. I think it's the brush, like cleaning my water every so often or at a specific time and using this brush for that thing and making sure this color is that, you know, all of those little things. That's what I really learned was planning, planning, planning. And then of course I learned a ton about the Pleistocene. I've always had an interest in it, but I learned so much more about Maryland's landscape and plant life. And I had no idea that there was a glacier rolling in from Pennsylvania. I had no idea that we have mammoth remains at the bottom of the Chesapeake right now. There's so much that I didn't know about the content that we were representing. And I heavily leaned on you, Bronwyn, and Joe and Renee to help me with those things. Like, thank goodness I did have clear parameters. It was very clear that this was meant to depict a wide angle landscape shot as opposed to like that ground up looking view. And it was a must have to have that Pennsylvania glacier in the distance. And it had to look lush and cold to represent the feel of Maryland at that time. And all of that was something that I just hadn't thought about deeply enough before. And I'm really, really glad to have that learning experience from you.
One of my favorite parts of the mural is just the detail of the breath coming out of the cold breath coming out of the animals. I find that very endearing.
Thank you. I thought that was a big risk because I had to basically paint on top of the mammoths and on top of the landscape that I just spent all this time on. And I was like, oh, if this doesn't look good, there's nothing I can do. But I agree. I think having the breath coming out of their mouths helps sell how cold it is. And I spent quite a lot of time watching National Geographic videos from the Pacific Northwest to try to depict this landscape because, like I said, I knew it had to be lush and green to sustain these animals' diets, but it's also cold. What does cold look like?
Yeah, that was one thing that I hadn't thought of, because when people think the ice age and the tundra, they just think ice and cold and no plants. But then how do the animals sustain themselves? That was something that I learned.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I didn't ever think of it so critically before. And I think one piece of the planning that ties into all of the above we've discussed was the color palette. I didn't want the finished piece to feel too muted or sepia or warm, because that's usually what old looking historic images feel like. And aesthetically, I like it, but I didn't feel like it would be appropriate to bring that aesthetic to the project. So I painted the whole wall ice blue from Sherwin-Williams first, and I mixed it into almost all the colors I used because I wanted a coolness in everything. And I also limited the amount of colors that I used. It wasn't a pure limit, like a strict limited palette, like there's been stricter palette choices made than what I indulged in. But I think part of the reason that it went so timely was because for the whole first top half of the painting, I only used 3 colors. So there wasn't a lot of mixing, there wasn't a lot of trial and error to get it right or to recreate a color after I ran out of it. And it also helped give a convincing sense of depth. Like, for example, the palette only uses white, ice blue, and ultramarine blue all the way to the midground. And then we started adding the moss green and forest green. And then I started adding in the browns and a little bit of the yellow and red when it came to the mammoths themselves to give them more depth. And I think that that helps give it a sense of space because there's fewer colors in the background and more colors in the foreground. So when you stand back, I was hoping to achieve that sense of depth that way, but it also made it faster to accomplish. If I agonized over every subtlety in the color palette on that glacier in the horizon, I don't know if I would have gotten it done in time. Like I had to make those choices.
You'd still be sitting there painting it right now as we talk.
Yeah, yeah. Where's my book? Where'd it go?
Sure, you have another question? Go ahead.
I was wondering if some of the plants that you've made in the mural actually still exist today, or if it's mainly plants that have gone extinct.
I think they do. The buffalo berry bush and oh, let me look it up. I just had it. It was the White Mountain Avon is the flower that I was interpreting. And then the trees are still very much around. The white pine, black pine, spruce, cypress. Those were all depicted as accurately as I could, and they're very much
And
here.
I'll just add those trees are still around, but they are more northern than in Maryland. So the composition of the forest in Maryland has changed as the climate has changed. So now there we have more deciduous forest, eastern hardwood forest versus that kind of alpine-esque tree composition.
Yes, exactly. And that goes for the animals too. Like pronghorns and elk still exist, but you wouldn't find them in Baltimore.
Also, sorry, it's like kind of loud. We're at an airport right now. I was wondering if like the plants that you work with that don't exist anymore, if you use mainly like fossils of them, or like other illustrations that people made in the past.
Yeah, I think a textbook application would heavily depend on referencing fossils. But because the plants were just suggested in this piece, I didn't have to do that. If I had to do what I had to do, I did used to work at the Smithsonian with snakes, and we had to depict every specimen, dorsal, lateral, and ventral. And the plants were a similar thing. I didn't spend as much time in botany as I did in herpetology, but we had to depict the plants down to the millimeter of what they looked like at different angles. And because this piece was meant to have more of a feeling, I didn't have to get that detailed in the plants. I could just suggest what they looked like and the piece would still be successful. So, whew. But yeah, that's a great question because there's definitely applications in which I would have had to do that.
And with the woolly mammoths and the mammoths being so recent in our geologic history, and the specimens that we've gotten that are frozen, they really know what they were eating through what they have in the stomach contents. So there's a lot of paleobotany going on with that, so they can really get it down to that, as well as the isotopes that they can draw out of the trunk as well. and to match where they were on the landscape and what grasses they were eating. And they even found in one of the teeth of a baby of one of the mammoths that was recovered a piece of a buttercup that was in the middle of a tooth. So they knew that it was maybe had pulled up some grass and there was a little buttercup in the tooth.
Yeah, and reasons like that is why I had to depict flowers. Like I had to have the trees, the woody shrubs, the tall grass, and flowers in the piece. So it was less about how accurately does the flower look and more about like, we need to explain that they ate flowers.
All right, any other questions right now for Brittany? Okay.
Well, I hope that was more fun than listening to me ramble and have a question on your mind the whole time.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was a real blast and like I keep saying, a dream come true.
And when will we be able to purchase the cards in the store?
I am dropping off 100 cards on Saturday. So as soon as they're in the gift shop or in like the registry system, presumably they'll be available quick. And then I'm hoping, I'm in the very beginning stages of starting an Etsy. I feel like the last artist ever to start one. But the note card thing really had me thinking, and I would really like to pursue that. So I'm in the beginning stages of stocking up on some fun merch with not just the mammoths on it, but other Pleistocene animals. I have a big itch to capture as many as I can, like Pokemon, in my sketchbook, and then share that with everybody.
I really like the idea of doing the jigsaw puzzle with the whole thing. I thought that would be.
Yeah, I think my biggest challenge has been photographing the finished piece because the structure was already in the room when I started painting. So I never got like the perfect vantage point to photograph the whole thing. Not to say it can't be done. I could still get in there and do it, but it's taking some time to get the right camera with the right aperture and the right lens and the right spot to capture the full piece in focus.
Well, Brittany, talk to Renee about that because she does that professionally. So she takes pictures of buildings, but she can probably have a plan or help us develop a plan to take that picture.
That sounds awesome. I would love that.
Does anybody else have any ideas on how we can use? If you have any ideas on how we can utilize the mural, or what kind of merchandise you'd be willing to wear or show or put on your wall, let us know and let Brittany know. I'm sure she'd love the input. You don't have to answer right now.
Oh, where did I train? That's a good question. I went to MICA for my undergrad and my master's in art. And that was sort of, well, however, it was a privileged experience, but there was no scientific illustration courses there. It was something I shoehorned into all of my assignments. So some of them ended up getting some pretty bad grades. But fortunately I did, by my junior year, I was interning at the Smithsonian, and that gave me real world applications for this yearning I had. Ever since I'd gone to a zoo or an aquarium or a natural history society, the combination or the nexus of art and science was never lost on me. I just always knew I wanted both. And I couldn't be lured away in any other genre or practice. So between my studies at MICA and at the Smithsonian, that was a really good background foundation experience for me.
And we're hoping that Brittany does some more stuff with us as well. So stay tuned on that.
That would be awesome. Actually, I blast from the past. In like 2017, I was in the LEP club and I designed the club shirt, and that was a big hit. So I think I'd like to get back into doing stuff like that too. I love the Natural History Society. I love making art. I love expressing what we love and what we're learning and sharing that with others. So all the avenues in which to do that is going to be fulfilling. And I think anybody who has an interest in the same combination of art and science has sorry, my snake is making a weird noise. Anyway, I think anybody who has that interest should pursue it, because there are enough like-minded people out there to share it with.
Absolutely. Well, and it's been such a pleasure working with Brittany. She kept us on schedule as well, which was great, and because she was very planned out. And the final product is more than we could have ever expected. I get it. It brings me joy every time I walk in, and I walk in every day to the building and take a look at it. There's just, and I see something new on it every day. I don't know if she put any other Easter eggs in that picture for us to look at or find, but I hope that you all, and I invite you all to come for the first time or for the 100th time to the museum and spend some time enjoying the mural, especially now that we more about what went into it, and enjoying learning more about our natural world. So on that note, yeah, and does anybody have any other questions for Brittany? Otherwise, we'll call it an evening, and we'll wish Shira a good flight over there from the airport.
Yes.
And we'll see y'all in a couple weeks to learn, why do we collect things? Why do we pick up rocks and put them in boxes and all of that? So come back, and we hope that we see you at the museum, online, or in the field at one of our field trips. Stay well, stay curious, and stay outside, everybody. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. This was great.
Thank you.